Hello everybody, this is Mr. Johnson here with Algebra 2. We're going to be finishing out notes today, talking about key features, qualities, characteristics of graphs, and being able to identify them and label them and do all that stuff. So yesterday we went over 5 key qualities, 5 key features. The first 2 were relatively easy. They were the x-intercepts here and the y-intercepts. And all that is where the function crosses the x-axis at these points and where the function might cross the y-axis. Now, one thing that you might have noticed, maybe not, is that you will only ever have one y-intercept, but you can have multiple x-intercepts. That has to do with the definition of what a function really is, and we'll get to that a little bit later. Now, the third thing that we talked about was relative maximums or minimums. And all that is a maximum is like the top of the hill. It's where you change directions from going up to going down. And a relative minimum is the bottom of a valley, where you change directions from going down back to up. So you can see if we're going on our graph, we change directions right here. This would be a relative minimum. Then we change directions up here. That's the top of a hill. That's a maximum, relative maximum. We have a relative minimum and a relative maximum. So it kind of goes back and forth in this graph. Now, we do not consider the arrows to be relative maxes or mins because they keep going on up forever. They would actually never finish, and we don't know. There is no number that they just stop at, so that's why we don't say relative maxes or mins. The last 2 are probably the toughest. This is increasing and decreasing intervals. Remember, an interval is a set of x values. So it's the distance that x is traveling while it's doing that thing, particular thing. In this case, increasing, going up, or decreasing, going down. So I said this is kind of like a roller coaster. So if you're going from left to right, which you always read a graph from left to right, you're decreasing at first. And so you need to tell me all the x values that is happening on. So that's why we have from negative infinity to negative 1. Even though this arrow is going up, it doesn't matter. You're coming from the left-hand side. From there to there, in terms of x values, you're going down the roller coaster. And then you switch, you go up. So you go up from negative 1 to 1/2. So on this set. So that's where we get this particular interval. And I know intervals look like points, but what tells me that this is not a point is the x that is in front. And you have to have that, or else I think this is a point, which is technically not true. Now, we happen to go through several different problems. The second problem was relatively easy. Couple of intercepts. The intervals where it's increasing and decreasing, not too bad. We went through that as class. The third problem was a little bit tricky. Particularly because of the shape. It was a lot of up and downs, stuff like that, which means sometimes you can get a lot of x-intercepts. It means you have a lot of maximums and minimums. It also means that increasing and decreasing intervals, there are going to be a ton of them. So that was kind of tricky. There also wasn't a scale, no scale right here, which makes it kind of sad because you have to estimate, and sometimes that's not fun. The next graph you guys were working on your own and filling some of this out. We have a nice cat here for our y-intercept, good old 0, 0, which is actually the only point that can be an x-intercept and a y-intercept. Fun fact there. And then the last one that we did here about increasing and decreasing intervals, I don't think we got done. So we're going to go ahead and let's just finish that. Remember, they're intervals, so you need x to say that these are x values. From negative infinity, it appears that we're going down. Even though the arrow is pointing up, you read from left to right. So we're going down, 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 all the way until this point. So from negative infinity, let's see, whoops, put it in the wrong category. So we're decreasing from negative infinity all the way to negative 2. Then from negative 2 all the way to here, I know we're going up. So on this interval, So we are increasing from -2 to 0. Then we happen to be going down. Maybe I'll change my colors. We're going down from here to here. So that is from 0 to 2. And then after this point, forever, we're going up. We are increasing. So we go back up to increasing. We say, hey, from 2 to infinity, we're going up. And one thing that you should notice, if we start at negative infinity right here, okay, you go to -2. From -2, this hops on over, and we go from 2 to 0. From 0, we hop on over. There should be no gaps from 0 to 2, okay, because there are no gaps here. This graph is continuous. It never stops, or it never has holes or gaps or anything like that. So all the numbers should connect. In the end, you go from negative infinity here to positive infinity. That's because the graph goes from those directions, negative infinity to positive infinity. So let's go ahead, and today, what we're going to do is we're going to finish out the last couple of qualities. So we're going to talk about end behavior, which is really easy. Positive and negative intervals, again, that word coming up. And then domain and range. These are all really important qualities or characteristics. We're going to go ahead and start with end behavior. Super easy. Really easy. All you have to do is tell me what the ends or the outermost edges of the function is doing. What the ends of the function are doing. Okay, and it's mainly a direction. So I don't know if you want to put that in there. So here's how we do this, okay? On the left and on the right, those are the two directions we are looking at. So on the left, our function is going up. That's where the arrow points. On the right here, our function is going down. So that's all you really need to say. On the left, it is going up. On the right, it is going down. So it's falling on the right, and it is rising on the left. The end behavior is technically the only one that you go from the middle and you work your way out, okay? So it's kind of like a ripple effect. Ooh, I did not want to do that. Okay, it's a ripple effect. And so you see, I'm going out, I'm going this way, okay? So that's probably one of the a little bit more different ones. Let me erase all that crud here. Get it out of the way. So all we have to say is what direction we are on, what side of the graph we are on, and then what is it doing. It's relatively easy. So let's go ahead and let's try the next graph here. Alright, so for this end behavior, on the left, on the right, what are we doing? On the left, we happen to be going down, okay, from the middle, we're going out, spreading out. And on the right, we're going up. So on the left, we went down, on the right, we go up. We are falling on the left, and we are rising. So I always like to put the arrows and the words. That just kind of helps reinforce everything. I'm going to try to keep this speedy since it's a video. Okay, moving on to that third graph here. End behavior. The left and the right hand side. So on the left hand side, over here, appears we're going down. So we're falling. And on the right hand side, we're doing the same thing, we're going down. So we're falling. And actually, if we're going down on both sides or if we're going in the same direction. That tells us some special things about the function, which we'll learn in probably a couple of days. Kind of some secrets about how they're made. The end behavior for the third one, if you guys want to try this, that would be great. See if your answer matches mine. So on the left-hand side, it's going down. On the right-hand side, it's going up. So that means it's falling on the left and rising on the right. That says rising. My chicken scratch. And please feel free to pause the video if I'm going too fast. I'm just trying to be efficient here with time. The last one here, I believe, is end behavior for this graph. So on the left, on the right. I would have people come up, but since it's a video, you can't really write on a video. So I'll just show you here what's going on. On the left-hand side, we're going up. On the right-hand side, we're also going up. So we're rising on both the left and the right. You really only have two options. You can either be rising, going up, or falling, going down. So hopefully that's pretty easy. Alright, so let's go ahead and let's go all the way back to the front page. And I gotta scroll on this one too. Okay, positive and negative intervals. This is going to be important, real important. And it's very similar to actually increasing and decreasing intervals. All we're looking for here is when the graph is positive. And when I say positive, I'm talking about the y values. So this again, interval talks about x values. Okay, so we're interested in the x values. So it is where the graph is above the x-axis. Okay, and what you're technically talking about that is positive, it's where the y values are positive. So the y values of the function. So negative intervals, it's just kind of the opposite of that. It's where the graph is below the x-axis, or where the y values are negative. Okay, and when I say y values are negative, I'm talking about when they're down here, versus positive is when they're up here. This would be positive, this is negative. And we're going to talk about the intervals where that happens. Let's go ahead and let's get that definition down. Y values are negative. So when we're writing these intervals, I'm going to go ahead and make my positive interval green. And I look, and one thing that you can think about for these positive and negative intervals is it's kind of like a submarine. That might be a good note to put. So, and you want to know in the submarine, so like, yeah, one of those ship things that's underwater. Yeah, beautiful. We'll put a little porthole in there. So a submarine can either be below the water or it can come above the water when it surfaces. So the x-axis is kind of like the water. And I want to know, when am I above for the positive interval? So if I'm looking, here's my water. If I'm looking, I have a piece that is above right here. And that goes in terms of x from negative infinity all the way from the left to this point at -2. So at -2, I go from above the water to then below the water. So I need to say that from negative infinity to 2. Now I'm also above the water from here to here, okay, on this stretch right there. So I've surfaced from 0 to 1. Okay, then I touch here, and then I'm surfacing again from 1 to 3. 1, 2, 3 out. So from 1 to 3. Now below the water, we'll make this blue. So all of this is above the water. It is positive. Negative intervals, that's when you're below the water. So we're below right here. From -2 all the way to 0. So we start off with x. This is an interval. From -2 to 0, we're below the water. Now I'm not below the water here. I'm just touching the water. I am the water. I'm right on the edge. And then I'm only back down below here at the end. So from 3, that's the x value here, 3, all the way to infinity. Okay, so these have a similar quality. And what I usually do is I bounce back and forth. So above, below, above, above, below. And I would just write them in that order. So above, below, above, above, below. I would kind of go in that order as I'm writing them. And that just comes from experience and practice. That's why homework is so important. So let's go ahead and let's try the next graph. Positive intervals or negative intervals. If I'm reading this from left to right, okay, I'm looking on the left, I am below the water, right here. So I'm below the water, so that means I'm negative. So I would start off saying, hey, all the way from the left to this x value, 1, 2, 3, 4, -4, I'm below the water. I'm a submarine. And then after that, I'm above the water, above the water, above the water, above the water to right here. So from -4 all the way to 1, I'm above the water. So I'm positive from -4 to 1. Then after that, I happen to go back underwater, 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 from 1 all the way until 4. So I'm back down here and below the water from 1 to 4. And then after that point, I'm above. So maybe I am a submarine airplane, and after I go through the water, I'm going to take off and go into outer space. So here's my submarine airplane. It's got wings now. Oh, it's beautiful. So from 4 to infinity. That's when I am above the water. And again, these should connect. So from negative infinity to -4, -4 to -4, -4 to 1, 1 to 1, 1 to 4, 4 to 4, 4 to infinity. There should be no gaps here. Let's try the next one. Positive intervals, negative intervals. So if I'm looking here on the left, I happen to be below the ocean. So I am negative. So I'm negative from -4, or sorry, not -4, I'm past -4. I'm negative from negative infinity all the way from the left to -4. Now, I'm not negative here at this point because 0 is neither negative nor positive. It's kind of like a neutral point. So there's a break here. And then I'm down below all the way till here. So from -4 to 0. Okay, there's a breaking point because 0 is neutral. From 0 to 2. Then I hit a neutral point. From 2 all the way to 6. Then I hit a neutral point. And actually I'm never above the water. So this is like a submarine that keeps on coming up, surfacing. They got to send out a homing signal to their satellite. or maybe they gotta listen to their favorite radio station. But this graph is all below. Okay, there is no positive interval here. There's nothing where it's above the water. So you can put the word none up here. That would be fine. Or you can just leave it blank. I understand that everything is under because it goes from negative infinity, keeps on connecting all the way to infinity. That means it's all below. Feel free to pause it, guys, if I'm going too fast. I know sometimes it's hard to write things down. So for this graph, starting on the left, I'm below, so that means I'm negative from all the way on the left, negative infinity, to negative 3, right there, the x value. Now after that, I am positive, positive, positive until that point. So from negative 3 all the way to 0. And it appears I'm back below the surface of the water. Okay, from 0 all the way to positive 3 this time. And then I'm back above. Okay, so I'm finishing above the x-axis. I'm positive. My y values are positive. Okay, this is 3 or 3.1 comma something. This is 4 comma, I don't know, 4. So from the value of 3 all the way to infinity, that's when our y values are above. Okay, last one. Hopefully you guys will be able to see this one. On the left-hand side, starting on the left. Am I above or below? Appears to be positive. I'm above. So I'm going to start here from the negative infinity part all the way to negative 3. Then I happen to go below the water. There. So from negative 3 all the way to 0. Now at 0 I just bottom out. I'm at a neutral point, and then I go below again. So from 0 all the way to positive 3, I'm below the water. And then from positive 3 all the way to infinity, I'm back above. So from 3 to infinity. So with increasing and decreasing, you're going on your graph until you hit a changing direction. For positive and negative intervals, you're going along your function until you hit the x-axis. Okay, so it's what you're relative to. Are you relative to these changing points, or are you relative to an axis? That's the difference between those two. And it's kind of hard to keep them separated when you're first starting, so that's why you need to make sure you practice. Okay, and always look at your notes. Okay, that's why we have notes. That's why we go through all this stuff as a class, so that you guys can have the answers and know what you're doing. The last two, domain and range, are probably the most important two out of all of these. So the domain. Domain is something that hopefully you're familiar with, especially from like Algebra 1. Domain is all the x values that your function uses. That's the most basic version. Okay, remember x values, you need to go left to right. Okay, that's which way the x-axis goes, left to right. Now the range, if the domain is x values, the range is going to be the y values. So it's pretty much the same thing. All the y values. That your function uses. And that is going to be up, or sorry, yeah, down to up, not up to down. So down to up. So what we do for these, since we're interested in x values, we put in x. And then for the range, since we're interested in y values, we put a y. This is the only one that is not x in front. All the others are interested in x. The range is interested in y. It's kind of the odd man out. So we're going to do interval notation again. We're going to have these parentheses. So I want to know what x values do I use. So if I'm looking here, left and right, okay, the important thing to look for, am I ever stopping as I'm going to the left? Okay, this arrow is going to keep on going, keep on going, keep on going in this general direction, and it will keep on getting further and further and further out in terms of x values. So it goes all the way to negative infinity, or from negative infinity. Okay, it keeps on going, and we got this interesting part here in the middle, and then I want to know, where do I go on the other end? Since I'm going, and it looks like my arrow is slightly angled, I'm making it more exaggerated, but since it's slightly angled, I'm going to keep on going out in terms of my x values. Eventually, if I zoomed out a ton, I would be out here at 6, I would be out here at 7, I would be out here at 8. So I'm never going to stop as I'm moving to the right. So that means I go all the way to infinity. This means I move from negative infinity to positive infinity. I'm going left forever and I'm going right forever. So then the range, and it's important to do these things together, the range we need to look up and down, or down and up, whichever direction you want to go really. Just make sure you keep things straight. So this means I'm going on this axis, gosh darn it, right here. So if I look, I have an arrow that goes down forever. Okay, so eventually I'm going to get to y values that are way down there. I also have an arrow that's going up. So eventually I'm going to get to y values that are way up there. And it never stops going up and it never stops going down. And if that's the case, okay, I use all the y values from negative infinity all the way down, all the way up to positive infinity, which would be the arrow going up. So domain and range, you look left and right. Or domain, sorry, you look left and right. Range, you look up and down. Those are the directions that you're looking for. And this is the trickiest part. This is one of the trickier ones. So the second graph here, domain. Make domain red. So the x values. So I go over here on the left. My arrow is pointed that way. I go over here on the right. My arrow is pointed that way. So eventually I'm just going to keep on using everything. Keep on using everything. So that's good. That makes it easy for us. We went from the left forever, negative infinity, and we're going to go right forever, positive infinity. Range. I'll make these, ooh, that's a gross yellow. I'll make them green. Make them blue. No. We'll go pink, yeah. That's cool. So we have purplish pink yellow here, or purple, jeepers. Purplish pink color here for the range, for the Y. Yellow starts with the letter Y. Jeepers. Get your act together, Mr. Johnson. So for the range, we need to be looking up and down, remember? So I go over to my graph, and I'm seeing up and down action. I know this is going down, okay? And this over here, it went up, but then it kind of went down. But I know in the end, it's going up here. That's important. So it is eventually going to keep using larger and larger y values. It eventually is going to be using smaller and smaller, like further and further away y values there. So it goes from negative infinity, right down there, all the way to positive infinity. And I would encourage you, if you're having trouble with some of these, to label the directions, but then also think they have to be in order. Okay, so I've seen this a lot in Algebra 2. Kids put infinity before they ever put negative infinity. What has to come first? If you're counting like -3, -2, -1, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, that's how the order of numbers goes. So eventually, I mean, you'll get towards infinity, and eventually you'd get towards negative infinity. You have to list them in chronological order. These first, then these, then these, then these. So put them in order, negatives before positives. All right, domain. This one's going to be interesting. So the domain, the x values that I'm using, okay, I need to look left and right, so this direction and this direction, and it appears that this arrow is going down to the left, so that means I'm going from negative infinity, so I'm coming from the left all the way to the left. I keep on going, keep on going, keep on going, keep on going, and now I'm headed towards positive infinity because my arrow is pointed gradually to the right, so I'm going from negative infinity to positive infinity, all the way from the left to all the way to the right. It never stops in there. The range, the up and down. So it goes down, okay? This side is going down, so I've already got that covered. Now, as I'm going, okay, you have to kind of visually think, how far is it going to go? How far is it going to go? How far is it going to go? And the highest that I ever get is 0. I have a couple of points that are bing, 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 right on 0. So I'm going from negative infinity all the way down here with this arrow. Keeps on going, keeps on going. From negative infinity, and I go all the way up. The highest I can go is 0. Okay? So, we haven't really talked about how to write the interval notation yet, but technically, since we have a point here at 0, technically we should make this a bracket because we can touch 0. So this says we can touch 0. As opposed to like the infinities, you can't touch infinity. So if we have an including point here, like this is 6, 0, 2, 0, all the y values here, we have to include it. If there is a top or a bottom, if there is a maximum or a minimum, you have to include those points. And we'll get more practice with that. That's kind of tricky. That's one of the tougher things about interval notation is, do you use a parenthesis or do you use a bracket? This means you can't touch it, so no touch. No touching. And this is, yes, touching. So like if you had to go on a date, your first date, and your parents, they would probably say, hey, parentheses, no touching. You can't touch that. Okay? Versus, yes, you can grab it. You can grab 0 here because there's a point there. All right, let's go ahead and let's try this next one. We're almost done, guys. Hold on. Domain and range. So, domain is the x values, so I'm looking left and right, here and here. It looks like I'm going, eventually I will cover all these, so I'm going from negative infinity, and eventually I'm going to cover all of those points, so I'm going to positive infinity. Negative infinity to positive infinity. And you're going to find that's usually the case until sometimes we get graphs that are broken up. So they might have a piece here, stop, and start over here. Okay? That's when you start to get weird domains. That's what you got to look out for. Range, the y values. So I'm looking down and I'm looking up. So on the way down, it looks like it's going to go down forever. On the way up, looks like it's going to go up forever. So from the bottom, okay, you can also put these lines in. Okay, I'm going down, going down, going up, still there, still there, still there. So from negative infinity to positive infinity. Okay, that's how I'm scanning. I'm scanning from down to up. Ooh, and the last one here. Domain range. let's do domain, left and right. So I'm scanning from this direction, okay? I think those lines are kind of helpful. Maybe they just mess you up, but on the left, I keep on going. That's going to keep crossing those lines. On the right, I keep on going. That's going to keep crossing those lines. So I'm using x values from negative infinity all the way to positive infinity. For the range, I'm looking up and down. So I need to make my lines like this. This is the way I'm looking. Going, 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 going. So you'll notice down here in this area, I didn't have a graph. There's nothing there. I actually started right here at these points. Okay, and this is getting kind of messy. But I started using y values at what y value? -2. This is at -2. So I didn't have any graph here as I'm drawing these horizontal lines. Nothing, nothing, nothing. Now I started. So I started at -2, and I had graph, had graph, had graph, had graph. And I will continue to keep having graph because it keeps on going up to infinity. Now you can't touch infinity, but we can touch -2. So that would be a case where we would use a bracket. There is a point here. There is a point here. Okay? So it's kind of like how far the graph goes in a certain direction. And we're going to get more practice with this. So if you're having difficulty, don't worry. It's not the end of the world right now. Okay? But with the rest of the class period, I want you guys to go ahead and work on the homework. The homework should be in the back of that folder, or the back of my binder. If you get done with the homework, which I would be very surprised, you can go ahead and maybe work on some of that practice, but we'll probably get to the practice sometime next week. So I will be back on Monday, and hopefully we'll be able to answer any questions and get you guys all ironed out. Thanks for listening, guys, and paying attention. Have a great weekend.